in Seabird 1985.
What, did it have that name then?
Well, it was ever MACup. Whoever called it MACup.
In 84.
Right in 84.
Wow.
Short after the
Wow.
world
Okay.
US.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first time in Germany or in Munich?
No, I've been to Munich at least once, maybe twice before.
Mm-hmm.
I had a wife that was heavy in kayaking. It's
Oh.
big and sorry. So Augsburg had the World Championships
Champion,
one
yes.
year, and I was there. And then there was a whitewater one I went down that was also in Germany somewhere.
Because
But it was-
because Munich is the leading town of
It was
engineering.
down it was actually in northern Italy,
Mm-hmm.
I think. But I've been here, yeah, once, about once.
Have you ever been visited the German museum? It's the
Nope.
it's the old engineering heart of.
No, I believe it. No, I love German architecture too.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
a lot of my favorite architects were Germans.
Is it okay if I take some photos for the interview?
Of course.
Okay. Let's start.
Here we go.
Yes. My first question is, why did you came out with iWoz right now? I mean, is there any you write that you had no time before?
Actually, I think it's a worthwhile thing to exist, but I have so many other projects going on all the time. I haven't had time to write it. I've even returned money a couple times in the past to book companies
Mm-hmm.
and apologized that I didn't have time to write it. This time I had a co-writer. She approached me about doing it. It wasn't my idea.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea to do it right now. So she approached me, and I met her, and I said, okay. So once she was in the picture, I had to do it.
Okay. Can you tell something about your other jobs you are doing right now?
Yes. We started a company that's an acquisition corporation. It's a strange kind of company. We raised a lot of money, $170 million, myself and two former Apple executives, and we went public on the American Stock Exchange, and we were not allowed to know what we're going to do. By law. No, there's a law. There's a law for this kind of company. You're not allowed to know. Once we had the money, we had 18 months to find and use that money in one acquisition deal. And we found it and announced it.
Okay.
We haven't completed it yet. It's a chip maker in Southern California that makes chips, which originally wouldn't have been my first choice, but we have so many plans to enhance their tools and whatnot, and some clever approaches what we're going to do to turn them into something that I am real excited about that now. So I'll be working for that full time in February after the book thing
Do
is
you work
done.
as a business angel or as an engineer for the company?
Oh, I will be more of a chief technology officer, but I'm going to retain a lot of my public life in the world, a lot of boards that I'm on and that sort of thing. So I may not have full time. So maybe it'd be some other slightly related category. But absolutely, I intend to think about which. I want to think in terms of products of the future that make sense with today's technology that are going to go, that our chip company can start making chips for. See, way down the food chain, down the chain. That's what I want to do.
Okay. Someone else? I could continue.
And that's the most recent. I'm also putting on another version of my big music festivals, the S Festival, same name, summer of 2007. And December of 2007, I'm driving to the South Pole in a Hummer modified for hydrogen.
Why are you
Yeah,
doing that?
it's a new road. What?
Why?
Why are you doing that?
I was invited
Just
by
experience? Oh.
a friend of mine. A friend of mine has done a couple of projects in the past, drive around the world, where they drive cars around the world, and he's just good at organizing and doing these things. So he came up with the idea, and I said, "Sure, yeah,
Okay.
it's fun. It'll be different."
Mm-hmm. You write in your book about the Vietnam War and how it changed your education from your father.
Yes,
Your-
taught me a lot about types of people more than
Oh.
anything else. Yeah.
So, what do you think right now about the Iraqi war?
It's right
Do
from
you
the very
frequent-
from the very first day, actually from the day of 9/11, the words that our President Bush used I saw the whole thing happening again. Vietnam, the mentality in people, and of just wanting to prove things with military might, and I very much ashamed of it. It's just it's awful. It's just like the opposite of Christian. It's the opposite of religious, you know, where you try to treat people with kindness, understand them, and work things out. Yeah, I know. Everything has disgusted me for quite some time in the country, and yeah, it's lies, and it's like everything we're supposed to be good about, all of a sudden we're giving up, we're losing. No, we should be the shining country of the world. America, that I was brought up with, is just the kind country, the country of good people who have good justice procedures and everything. Mm-hmm. Now we have secret prisons, and so we're going to have secret trials we just passed, and the president isn't even going to be liable for breaking the laws. I mean, we changed all the laws. It's just horrible what happened. And so I'm just one after another, you know, from whether it's opposing stem cell research, the ban, you know, working so hard, so many people to ban abortions, just so many things going down. So it's too bad. But
is politics a future for you, like all your?
No. Politics, no, I ruled out a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Don't want to get too attached to things too strongly. This one is the only one I've really been attached to since the Vietnam War, because it's a war. It's taking weapons to kill people. It's a mass war, and that should be the last step. You know, seems like every young generation wants its own war, their chance.
But you're also now a political guy.
Just currently, just only in this one area. Yeah. I would have given up my life to prevent my children from having to go through what I went through with Vietnam. And trauma. Every day in the newspaper you read something bad and it bothers you. That shouldn't be the case. Yeah, so
okay.
It's bad.
Talking about the book,
yeah.
For us, you was a real hacker. Are you also feeling as a hacker?
Absolutely. I was never really a true hacker. Yeah. And I never once shut a computer system down. I never once took over a computer system. I was not that kind of a hacker ever once in my life. I would have been, though. I mean, my head would have loved to explore and try to find ways through the system and try to do things you're not supposed to be able to do. I just never did that. Yeah. I was a sort of hacker of somebody that hacks at a keyboard all the time and tries to write. All I wanted in college was to write every program I could think of writing. Yeah, I just wanted to write programs and programs and programs.
So your attitude is to solve problems as smart as possible.
Absolutely. To figure out clever solutions to them and to solve them when in ways that other people wouldn't do, or to build devices, largely to build devices, programs, software or hardware, and clever ways to use almost no money. Having no money really forced me in all my life, but wanting to build and design some things forced me to find the ways to do it for very little money, very little cost.
Do you use this attitude to other parts of life too?
Yes.
Not only in the technical way,
yes,
to solve problems, or in social ways or familiar ways.
Yes, like a lot of people, try to find a very simple, direct connection from a problem to a solution. I try to think that way in life. And if something has a whole lot of complications and tangents to it, if you were writing it as a program, it became very, very complicated and large, and then there's something wrong. You haven't hit on the good solution yet. There's probably better solutions. But don't oversimplify either. It's got to, whatever you come up with has to work. It has to make sense. I was never a theoretical scientist. I was always practical. Whatever I made had to work. That's how you judge it. It's got to do something useful. So that would apply to life too. You've got to come up with a solution that's not just fantasy. It's got to be really applicable and could work.
So you wrote in your book that you ever tried to be on the edge of technology development or things like that. So if you were today a student or a guy that just finished school, would you also in electronics and computers, or would you use the other way, biotech or?
I would look down in possibly biotech, but probably electronic directions of nanotechnology and materials that have new properties, materials that can make better chips, and I would look at the absolute newest results of those and try to be one of the first ones to turn them into products. That was my way, was to really be familiar with the latest chips that kind of had human prices. Mm-hmm. That's where everything starts, is at the down towards the atoms. And then sometimes it's a few years before it finally is in products that it was meant to solve.
So with the Apple one, or later the Apple 2, you are you realize a vision of a new computer. So what's your, do you have a vision of computers of the future now? What do you think? Well, how will look the computer in 10 years? What's the really important?
I don't really have future visions. I don't like to have future visions, partly by being so practical. You can express a lot of ideas that intrigue people. Wow, that's a great idea, Mr. Wozniak. But the trouble is, and then a year later they forgot you ever said it. That's how these visionaries usually are, that speak of the future. I could be accurate maybe a year out, because you know what technologies are being worked on by companies. But about 2 years out, you're almost never able to really have a good feel for where it's going to go. I don't think that I think computers have taken the tiniest steps in my lifetime towards becoming like a human. The way a human processes, the way a human thinks, and the way a human does things.
So the interface must be...
For example, artificial intelligence has really been phony. It's been totally artificial. It's a simulation of intelligence. It's not the way the brain works, because we don't know how the brain works. We don't know where memory is. Excuse me. Would the scientists be able to sit down and try to create many levels of artificial intelligence that could make a device that could sit by my television set and hear what I'm saying, the same as you could? That's never happened, and I don't think it will. But it's theoretically it's possible, but it takes an awful lot of disciplines of high-level science combining together, and usually many scientists don't work together well if they're all very bright. Could we make a robot that could make a cup of coffee? Probably not going to happen, unless some young kid in school gets the idea that's going to be his life goal. I could go into your house and make a cup of coffee, probably. You could come into my house and you might be able to make a cup of coffee. You might not. There's some strange coffee makers. You'd have to look at the words, but would a robot do it the way we've done it? We know how to do it from our failures. Robot just traversing and walking across a house hasn't even been done, really. So you've got to solve almost all these virtually impossible problems just to do something simple like that. The hearing example, you'd have to have, a chip that's adjusting its input filters and certain frequency filters and picking up a certain voice and trying to tune into its characteristics of the rhythm of 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables, the way they bounce up and down. And it would have to guess ahead the way a human does. If a sentence starts out this way, what way might it end? Or what did I hear that might have been, what word might that have been? You try to formulate a sentence. You'd have to write such a huge program, and that's not how we think of doing it. We just want to write one program, here are the steps, it does it, and it's done. And that's why it doesn't work its way into computers seeming like humans. Not yet. That's why computers could teach a lot better if a computer was really like a real human. Wow, you just have every kid in the world attracted to its best friend. And everybody could learn at their own speed.
Your first idol was your father, and I think some teachers maybe. Have you got idols now?
Idols now. Steve Jobs is actually an idol of mine. Let me think. I do have idols. and I have to think, but I have to remember who they are, and some of them are just unimportant and hardly noticed.
Yeah,
One
Bob
time,
Dylan maybe.
Huh?
Bob Dylan
Bob Dylan was
the
more
past.
of an idol then than he is now. I don't know why.
Is there some engineering ideals, or maybe like Einstein, as of physics, like dynamics?
Well, Einstein for how his brain worked.
Mm-hmm.
How did a brain ever think on that path? You know, and I buy copies of his papers from back when too, and just unbelievable to see where his mind went. So he would be an idol. Thomas Edison, you know, we all the common ones.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of the technical heroes that really built things, even Ford. But gosh, who are my heroes? I don't know why I can't think of them now. I mean, sometimes I'll hear songs. I know those singers are certain singers are my heroes, but I can't think of it right now here. Who to say? And when I meet those people, Hewlett and Packard were my heroes
Yep.
too. They are. And once I met Bill Hewlett, and I was just speechless. I couldn't get a word out really. My throat, gets all tight and it's hard to speak. And every once in a while, I'll even meet a musician that made some great music. That's my art, is popular music, and I'll just be hardly able to speak to them. I'm almost afraid to interrupt their space.
Yeah.
Okay. In the late 70s, you were forced to make a decision between staying at Hewlett Packard or joining Apple.
Actually, yes. When we raised the money for the Apple II computer, the money was probably in those years dollars equivalent of maybe €1 million today or more. It was a lot of money, but I had to leave Hewlett Packard, and I knew that I could stay an engineer secure for life at Hewlett Packard.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to design computers. I've been doing it on my own time for nothing. I can still do that. So yes, I stayed true to myself, and I said no to starting Apple, and almost didn't. And eventually a friend convinced me it was okay to start Apple to bring my work to the world and profit from it, and I could still be an engineer. And I didn't have to be more than an engineer at Apple. And that was what I needed to enable me to leave.
Where would you see Apple today if you would have chosen Hewlett Packard?
No, Apple would not exist. Computers would maybe be much different than they are today.
That's what I'm
Of course, they
wondering.
might be better. We don't know. We don't know. But
Not.
it sure would have delayed a lot of things of computers being fanciful with color and games and graphics, enough to be welcomed into so many homes. It would have delayed it a bit if Apple had not happened. Apple would not have happened if Hewlett Packard had. There were 5 times they turned me down. I think 3 of them are in the book. If they had gone ahead with the computer, it would have been the wrong computer, a finished, technical, professional product that wouldn't have interested anyone in their own home. Even with the same technologies, they would have built a different product, and would have been very bad for the world. There were a lot of little tiny things. If they had happened, I wouldn't have done Apple. Tiny things. I wanted to move with my company, Hewlett Packard, up to Corvallis, Oregon, and my wife didn't want to. So if I had moved, it never would have happened. A lot of lucky things. Hewlett Packard, they recognized, the engineers at Hewlett Packard recognized that what I had was just the greatest product of all time almost. And all of them, even the ones that turned me down, would say that. It's just that they knew it had to be outside of Hewlett Packard, because there's a company with a culture and a style of product, and you can't go against your own name, sort of, your reputation. So they couldn't do the right product that was needed, which was a less finished product. That was what was needed to really kick things off and start the personal computer era. And yeah, I loved that company. I couldn't talk them into it.
Now we are living in a digital revolution. Is the next step of revolution gaming, maybe? There's a huge gaming industry outside there. And now we've got the power of the computer to play. Are you a gamer? What do you think about
I was a gamer, very strong gamer, and got to a certain point. Once my children were about 8 years old, they got better than me, and I decided to just stick to a few simple games of my own. And I can't do the online games. My head can't assimilate certain of the newer things, so I just play simple games.
Pong or Breakout?
Yeah. I mean, I played Defender extremely well. That was a fast game. I was really good. I could turn the score over on that. Pretty much. And I'll play mathematical games, Sudoku. I played another math one for years ahead of it, so it was easy for me. So yeah, the online community, what I appreciate it through my kids, watching what they do and how much time they spend on it and what they do role-playing games.
You've got 3 kids, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How old?
24, 22, 19. So they're all college or beyond. Yes.
Yeah. To become engineers?
One of them graduated from a top school, Carnegie Mellon, in computer science, and he works for NASA on our space programs, including programming things for the Hubble Space Telescope. And my youngest son just went to college, and he's in engineering, computer engineering.
So like his grandfather.
His father. Grandfather. Well, grandfather wasn't in computers. That's the funny thing. He was a great engineer, but it was analog engineering.
Okay, right.
When I did computers, I sort of did it alone. He wasn't part of that group. He knew the first starting elements of it. He could teach me a little, but pretty much that's where I left him. That was my thing.
Okay.
And the next step in Apple was, the last step in Apple was the iPod industry. What do you think about the iPod revolution, maybe? Is it a revolution?
I think it speaks a lot about Apple's products and culture and Steve Jobs' thinking, basically, and his unfledging, having to have a product exactly right, the right balance, what's on it, what's not, how it works. And I just see that all over the iPod, because I was collecting every music device in the world. They were proliferating back when the iPod came out all over the world, MP3 devices. But nobody, and even though Apple seemed to be late getting into the game, the devices so far had either very tiny amount of RAM or enough RAM cards that it was expensive, or they had mini discs, which were very cheap. And I really thought the iPod was the first one to use that newer technology. That's where I say things start with the new pieces, the new little 1-inch hard disk. Made it all possible, boy. And when I heard about that little hard disk about a year before, I didn't really think of that being the application for it, music. So I'm very impressed. The iPod, I'm so glad we have them. Changed my life a lot. It really is the best music device I've ever had in my life.
You've got the red one edition, I think.
Yeah, I have the red one. Yeah. Well, I always have the latest iPod. I love the color on this one. Yeah, it's a beautiful one. But the iPods have always had a real beautiful look and touch. And I had Bang & Olufsen telephones with the scroll wheel. So when the iPod came out, I was already familiar with scroll wheels. I mean, it's a really nice way to navigate long lists of things. So, I don't know. So I like the iPod.
What do you think about the old Newton one?
It's nice to have all these great accessories too, because it makes the iPod world so much bigger than just one music device. Now, when the iPod came out, the difference between that and the other music devices I had was that the iPod was not a music device. The other ones were music devices that worked on files, MP3 files. And the iPod didn't work in any files. You see any files on it?
No.
You just plugged it in your computer and it worked. So Apple provided what people want is not a music device. And they don't even want a computer music device. What they want is music to the ear. To get the music to your ear, it starts out with performers and their agreements and working for companies that sell the music. Well, Apple came up with buy the music, and all of a sudden, no steps at all. It's on your computer. It's on your iPod. No thinking. So it's really, you got the complete thing you wanted, music to your ear. You don't care what the pieces are in the middle. The iPod, you don't want a music device. You just want something that gets it to your ear.
And the same in movies, or maybe?
Yes.
The future.
Yep. Same thing in movies. It's really that having the easy, complete solution. I don't agree that movies are the same, because I've always loved listening to music on portable devices from radios on, but I've never enjoyed watching small screens, and for 20 some years I've been buying the first little TVs, and then when they got color ones and different versions that were so beautiful, and I would use them for a few days and show them off and then never touch them again. I don't want to watch TV that way. So I think, you have iTunes and an Airport Express. You play your music to your living room speakers or your bedroom speakers. You just have a choice that pops up. That's what I really want on my iPod, is just a choice of the devices I can play it into. So Apple's come out with that.
Are you also a fan of audiobooks?
Yes, I am. I'm not a fan that I have a lot of time to listen to books, but I buy a few audiobooks, and pretty much I buy them and just gives me an audiobook that someday I'll listen to, and yeah, they're on my bigger iPods, not the small one.
Okay.
Sure. The funny thing is, of all my friends, I don't really, maybe it's just the group I'm in, I don't really too often, I'm in their car and I hear them playing an audiobook. So I'm not in that group, but I haven't. I just never have time to use it.
I'm looking at your watch. Can you tell me
Sure.
something about this wonderful...
I saw somebody wearing this watch at a vintage computer festival, and eventually I looked it up online and found where to buy it. And I got number 14, and it's got a little microprocessor inside for the time, and when I turn my wrist, it shows the hours and the minutes. So I'll turn my wrist, and it shows the hours and the minutes, and it uses a type of vacuum tube called a Nixie tube, and vacuum tubes are no longer made. So that's what makes the watch classy. It's great. It's using parts that are no longer made. Somebody just, brought them out of storage and made a few of these by hand. So it's kind of cool. It's waterproof and everything. It's Nixie tube watch. Those are real tubes with 100-volt anodes, the whole deal. It's an old technology, because I grew up with tubes at first. Then I moved into transistors, and then I moved to chips. I was lucky to be in Silicon Valley,
What's now your relationship to Apple and to Mr. Jobs?
Very cordial, friendly as ever. Not best friends like before we started the company. That pretty much dissolved right at the start of the company. We were going to go in different directions by design in the company itself. I go to Apple events and see him and talk to him politely and say hi, and we get together for lunch once in a while, not too often. I don't have any formal relation of things I'm working on or doing. Anytime that I'm sort of in an appearance or featured in the press or something, it kind of reflects on Apple. Steve's always been very polite to me. He's really doesn't show me the rudeness that most of the engineers that worked on the Macintosh, for example, say they'll never work with him again. It was just too horrible the way he treated them. I never saw that. And he's never done that to me.
But you're very critical to Apple now. Yesterday or a few days we read about the stock history. What's your
Now,
with the options.
the options, the stock options.
Backdated, good prices. You said,
I'm not sure what was printed in the press, but I'm not critical of Apple. Because I don't understand what the details of that are. But if Apple did something that was unfair to shareholders,
right.
that's wrong. Yeah, then it's wrong.
Sorry,
Yeah,
And Apple has to correct it. Yeah. Yeah, well, anything that has to do with financial, taking advantage of someone else, I would never have close to me in my life. Yeah, so if there's some funny business, that shareholders made some estimates based upon these public statements of the company, and then the company was doing something secretly that went against them with early options, the shareholders might have a right to complain. I'm not sure. I don't know what the percentages are of how much anyone claims they lost or whatever. To me, that's a small deal, actually.
I have the impression for you Fortran was the better programming language from the start on.
Well, actually, I had never used BASIC at all. So Fortran was my favorite language. It was for the language that scientists used. I also had used Algol and PL1, I think, at the time. And some lots of assembly languages. And I chose BASIC because Bill Gates' BASIC came into our computer club, and I could see that all these people that were buying computer kits, they weren't real computers yet, but their plan was eventually by the time they could run BASIC, they could write programs and all of a sudden be like supermen in their companies. All these little low-level technicians would be raised up high. And BASIC, why BASIC? I would have normally preferred Fortran, but there were books out called 101 Basic Games. And I knew that games were going to be a big part of this new computer for people, the fanciful computer. And BASIC's just as good as Fortran. And one computer language, another computer language. They're not that different in the commands you have, the number of them. I knew that much. So yeah, so I decided I should write a BASIC too. Bill Gates wrote it for the Intel chip. I'll write it for this 6502. And I'd never learned how to write a programming language. I'd never read a book. Well, as I wrote it, I didn't have any reference materials at all, just my own head and ideas. And I had a few ideas that were left over from some pages that a friend who went to MIT had Xeroxed me when he was there from his books. So I had a few ideas about stacks and where things would be put. And I came up with just an approach to writing a BASIC. I don't know if my approach was even what anyone else does, but it worked well.
Do you regret your choice of programming the software in BASIC?
No, I wrote all my programs in machine language, and I wrote a BASIC. Now, I have a couple of regrets. Having no familiarity with BASIC, I had to learn it from the Hewlett-Packard manuals at work. So I learned Hewlett-Packard BASIC, and I wrote the diagrams down. When I was all done, I found out that BASIC was rather different than the type of BASIC that Bill Gates had written, which came from digital equipment. The way strings were handled were totally different in the two languages. That was the main thing. So all the books full of computer games wouldn't work on my BASIC very well without modifying them. You had to modify them and do them differently.
Because you had a
That was a little mistake, yeah. Another mistake was to try to be the first in the world to get my BASIC done. I left out floating point, numbers with decimal points, which is okay because all my life I had programmed as sort of a number theorist. I had programmed things only with integers, even if they are decimal points. Our Hewlett-Packard calculators, the first calculators in the world with transcendental functions like sine and cosine and inverse, those calculators, we did all our calculations internally with integers to calculate the numbers that were 0.340567, you know. Those numbers were calculated all using integer algorithms because it was more accurate and faster. So I appreciated that from a purist point of view. So I decided to write BASIC, in integers, because I could run my games and I could run my Hewlett-Packard simulations fine. And I know how to do floating point. As a matter of fact, in the ROMs of the Apple II, I wrote and included floating point routines of my own. I only left them out of my BASIC to save time. And that I kind of regret, because what happened was it got to a point that Microsoft a year later came to us with a floating point BASIC while I was working to write one. And I said, yeah, let's just buy that and we can move on to other things. We tested their BASIC, put in some commands, it was fast enough. We bought it from Microsoft. When the license expired, we had to renew it because the Apple II was all the big money coming into the company. Our company's going to be shut down if we don't get a license back on the BASIC and have to stop the Apple II. And basically, I think that's where we licensed away the GUI to Microsoft. It was in exchange for their BASIC on the Apple II, which we needed to live. So I kind of regret that decision. Every piece of code I wrote, you probably read, I wrote by hand. And I figured out the ones and zeros for it. And I typed them into the computer. I couldn't afford an assembler. Normally what you would do is rent a terminal and pay a certain amount of money per month and to a time-sharing outfit and type your program into some other computer.
But you mentioned it was way too expensive.
And it was too expensive. I couldn't afford it. But it forces you, when you're handwriting everything, right down to ones and zeros, it forces you to be so close to your code that there's very few errors. There's never been one error in the Apple II hardware or software ever turn up.
Do you
It's
still
just
own
unbelievable.
Do you still own that book where you wrote your code?
Yes, I do. I have that book. I thought I'd lost it to the Apple lawyers, and they would borrow. I lost a lot of my all of my collection of documents that I had saved from the start of Apple. I never threw away one sheet of paper. I just, sheets and sheets. These are papers stacked up in folders. I lost that to the lawyers. They borrowed it for lawsuits, never returned it to me. But I kept the binder that the Apple II was made out of, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, someday I'll give that to, I'm giving that one to the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. I just haven't taken it over to them yet.
Computer History Museum is right for the next question. What are your emotions if you see your the first Apple, the Apple II, where you worked a lot for, as a exhibition product, to as a thing that's now history? What's your emotions there? Are you sentimental if you see an Apple II in a museum or on a?
Oh no!
On work.
I love seeing Apple IIs in museums. It's even rarer to see the Apple I.
Mm-hmm.
The Apple II had so many features that no one ever thought they'd see in their life. It was so advanced and ahead of the rest of the world because I designed it as myself as a computer. The Apple II changed the world that way. But the Apple I made probably the most important change of all. And that was getting rid of the ugly computer that was cold and commercial and lights and switches and replacing it with a human keyboard. Because every computer since the Apple I has had a keyboard. And every computer before had a front panel. When I see Apple I's, those are rare. See those in museums sometimes. No, it's the best thing you could ever see. Oh my God, that's my baby. They appreciate it too. There were a lot of Apple IIs made, so they're easy to see.
Do you have one of the first Apple?
Is it one of what?
Do you have a board of the first Apple?
I have the first Apple I prototype where I soldered all the wires myself. I have that board. And the one for the Apple II I lost. My hunch is Apple kept it. It got somewhere and somebody kept it by accident or somebody stole it. I don't know. I lost it.
And the first board, does it work?
The first board that I handmade.
Yeah. And
It would work if it exists.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. There were almost no parts on the Apple II that would go bad over time. There were parts on the Apple I that were sensitive to static electricity, and Apple I's are harder to keep working.
What kind of computer are you using now?
I always use the high-end laptop. Since the first Apple PowerBook, I became a total laptop. That's the center of my life. And I used to keep laptops in towers, lots of them at once, whatever brands there were now. I can only keep up with one computer. I don't have, with the internet here, I have so much time spent on email, I don't have time to keep a bunch of computers going. So I have a dual processor tower, and I never have time to touch it. I just keep my big music collection on it. The AIFF. I read in all of my music as AIFF or Apple Lossless now, because what I did once was I put 30 computers in my house, and I called over a bunch of friends, and each friend had a bunch of computers, took all my CDs, and we loaded them into MP3s. And then what happens? The iPod comes out, MP4s. So now I had to go back and load them all back in. I said, this time I'm going to load them in as AIFF. And then I just tell the computer, convert them all to MP3s, and it takes 30 hours. Convert them all to AAC, and it takes 30 hours. But if we ever go to MP5s, I don't have to read all my CDs in again.
Are you using also Windows computers?
No, I've used Windows computers in the past when they had to. I went into becoming a network administrator in the days that the world was shifting towards networks, a little before the internet and during the internet. I got into the internet so early that I got a 3-letter .com, woz.com, but I'm sort of proud of the fact I don't use it. I use woz.org because I'm not that much a commercial person. But in the days of the early networking equipment, some of it you had to almost use a PC to work it. So I would use a PC for that. I used virtual PC to do things like when I needed tools that were only written for a PC, like to program a PIC microprocessor. I would use it, and once in a while you have to update a device you bought. Only works in PC mode.
Well, what do you think about the open source movement? And have you ever met a guy like Linus Torvalds, the Linux guys?
I've had email from these guys, and I've never met him. Partly due to my notoriety, I get invited to be on things like the ICANN committee, and I've never had time for that stuff. As far as open source goes, I'm surprised that the market share numbers are so low. Like sometimes I'm surprised to read that Apple has such a low market share because you run into so many people that use the Macintosh. And the Linux numbers are even smaller. But it seems to me that company after company after company, when I talk to friends that work there, or in my own company, when we made a GPS product, choose to go open source all the way from the operating system to the SQL, as much as possible, because you've bought yourself the safety of even our early Apple IIs were really great because we published all the source code, and anybody could come and understand it, make modification, work around it to add their own special features and needs. And I really think it's a good way to go. I don't know where it winds up being Linux and GNU and Richard Stallman and the latest trouble he's causing, or changing the version. He'll only talk to the press if you call it GNU/Linux. Yeah. So, no, I don't use Linux. You know what? It looks like the world that I would be in if I were young, but I don't have time.
When you start again. If you're a young guy, will you also be an engineer today?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It was just.
Well, the right choice.
I might be a software engineer, but no, little things that kind of added up to, sets of steps, hooking things together and making them work a certain way. It's just the thing I loved in life. I had a lot of opportunities to love many things in my life when I was young, and that's the direction I went. I think I'd go the same direction again, which is piecing together things that add up to the whole. Maybe be a musician instead. It's like many technicians, many technical people and programmers that are really the great ones are also very good musicians. And I just played guitar, but I wasn't a musician. And I don't know, I'm the only one I've ever met that was sort of that good at writing code and all that wasn't a real classical musician.
When you grew up, you enjoyed to fool people.
I what?
You enjoyed to fool people, to make fools.
Fool people. I still do, all the time.
Right. Okay, what do you these days?
These days? Oh, every day I'm trying to think of if an idea occurs to me. This might be a cute little trick that a comedian on a stage might do. That kind of trick, I do it. Recently I was on the Colbert Report. Let me give you my business cards. And I told them how I carry my steak knife onto airplanes. It's true, I cut the steak with it. I like to ask the stewardess, do you mind if I use my business card to cut the steaks? And it does a very good job.
Oh, cool.
It does an excellent job.
Hey.
These are very special. It's all my home information
That's a
on there.
ticket to Guantanamo. This kind of business card.
That's what I was on the national TV show, the Colbert Report. And it's on the Comedy Channel, but it's extremely heavily watched. He said, don't you want to get on a list? You might get you on a list. And I said, I want to be on the list. If you knew me, of course I do. I'm a little, to be funny, you have to be a little bit eccentric. That's one. Now that one, more recently than that one, I wish I don't have them in my pocket because I'm not on the airplane till later tonight, later this evening. But I made some stickers. I had them printed by a professional printer, so they have a little higher quality than you can do on your home printer.
Yeah.
And they say, I put them on airplanes on the toilet, and it says, do not flush over cities. Picture of an airplane. It's the right colors and style to match our we call it OSHA, is our safety department in the United States. So it says, do not flush over cities. And then I leave them there on the toilets and planes. I did that one recently. I'm just always, you know, trying to make up little jokes and humor throughout my life. I always have. Yeah, why not?
It's make it easier sometimes.
Huh?
It's make it easier sometimes to make jokes.
In theory, also when you're working in engineering,
Mm-hmm.
it can get so intense, you have all-nighters, and occasionally a period to break things up. It's like a release,
Mm-hmm.
a relief of sorts. So maybe that's the reason.
Mhm.
A lot of engineers like to talk about the funny jokes they did with electronics on people who don't understand electronics. You know, and you always have that little advantage. It's almost like programming a computer to do something strange, like not, you know, like bring up a dialogue. Do you want to erase the hard disk? And the only choice is okay. And we laugh, and somebody who doesn't understand how you could have written a program to do that is tricked. Yeah,
Okay.
temporarily.
Our time is over.
It is.
Thank you
2
very
o'clock.
much.
2:30. 2:30. Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yep. It's the next interviews in line. Thank you very much.
I don't know if I'm going to
Just
make my flight.
One more question.
Achso.
Would you sign our books?
Oh,
Yeah.
of course.
Great.
I'm going to think. Yeah, I'm going to have to ask Anna what time the flight is, because I think it was a 5 o'clock flight.
For Oliver from Steve, maybe?
Who's this to?
Oliver?
Yes, certainly. This comes from Woz.
Oh, great.
That's the only, I changed my signature back when we started Apple because I believed in simplifying things in life. There's no,
Chris.
yeah, CH. Okay.
CHRIS.
And so I simplified my signature to Woz. So I'm the only author that you can read every letter of this of my signature.
For Michael, please.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And the last one.
And of course, I actually go back a few generations to Germany too. So I'm,
Matthias. M.A. It's a Matthew, the German version of
MATHIAS.
TTHIAS.
Actually, it's spelled the way it's pronounced. So that's good.
How long did
English is bad.
did it take you to write the book?
I think we spent a year on it.
A year.
Gina and I, we had 2 phases. The first phase, I would drive an hour up to San Francisco, night after night after night. I'd drive up to San Francisco, we'd meet at a coffee shop, and I would speak into a microphone.
Okay.
Then she got the transcripts back and edited, did a lot of editing work. Then we traded places. She would drive down towards where I lived because I had an injury. And we would meet at a restaurant and go over sentence by sentence to get it into the way I speak. Instead of making the book like a formal, written by an author. And I type well. I write very well. I could write grammar perfectly. We wanted to leave that naturalness flavor. And we're getting, a lot of reviewers say, oh, it sounds like a kid talking. Well, yeah. It's the 3 book companies. I have 3 publishers. Each one of them told me on the telephone back when. They said they wanted it in my voice. Because they talked to me on the phone. I never met them in person. They wanted it in my voice. So we put it in my voice. So it's very simple reading.
No, it's authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
2 more pictures, please. One.
And I still
reading-
don't have my Belkin. That's so bad. We tried recording that book on an iPod, and I would always bring in this thing. You plug a microphone in, and we tested it wouldn't work, so we used a different tape recorder
Great.
every time.
Just reading the MACup and then take a picture. Can you?
Oh, sure. Sure.
Yes, of course. And the last picture,
Okay.
I need for my ego.
Yes, with you. Oh, super.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's.
Give me a second. And one more.
Thank you very much. Great.
Yeah. Oh, you'll like this. Take a look at that. Look at that ring. That's great.
Great. What?
Try it.
Oh,
It's gravity.
it's great.
Yeah.
Prima. China.
Wow.
Who done that work?
Gravity.
No.